Thank you for joining on this third session of our 5 sessions for National Healthcare Decisions Day. And today we're going to talk about questions to ask yourself and your healthcare providers as you begin advanced care planning. One of the things that often has people kind of stuck and not completing their documents is they really don't know even where to start or how to kind of think about or put into words what it is they would want for their healthcare. Please, as Trevor said, please continue to put any questions or comments in the chat box so that we can talk about them at the end. This presentation is not meant for financial or legal planning purposes, is educational in nature, and certainly talk with your own advisors or healthcare or legal for legal decisions before making them so that we know that you are making the best fit for you. So memento mori, for any of you who were Latin nerds back in high school when they were still teaching Latin, this may be familiar to you. I was surprised this week when I actually saw this in relation to something completely different, looked it up because I did love Latin, but never remembered this particular saying. So memento mori is basically saying, remember we all die, and remember death, in really thinking about the focus to live. But I think it's a great thought for today because, again, advanced care planning is that we do want to remember that we all are going to die at some point. Having these conversations today does not bring upon that death. However, it's important to kind of think about some of these things ahead of time. It's always too early until it's too late, so that we can then really live and not have to be burdened by thinking about decisions that are still hanging over us. So really, we need to follow in Winston Churchill's footsteps and remember that our advanced worrying should simply become our advanced thinking and planning. And that is what these documents are all about. We can put worrying away because it's not going to change. It's not going to allow us to control anything more, but it does allow us to really focus in on what's important and thinking and planning. Knowing our core values is a really important component of thinking about advanced care planning, because when you need to choose or decide something, you can do so more easily by simply determining if the choice aligns with our own true values. And to that end, there's a lot of different exercises that you can find online when you put in core value exercises that can really help kind of start guiding you in the understanding of what is important. And these terms that you come up with that really become your core values can be the very essence of your documents. You can actually even put those words in as what is meaningful to you. So one example of a core value exercise is to take a list of words, none of which are negative, and no one would say, well, loyalty or growth or ethics is a bad thing, but you may believe that there's something on that list that stands above, that is more of what is at core. If you only could choose 5 of these words, what really drives your everyday successful living? And so that exercise, again, knowing that none of them are wrong, there's no wrong answers in this test. It's really just to help you really determine what's at the core of all decisions that you make. This really came to light in how true and how valuable really thinking about this was as a hospice social worker many years ago. And I worked with hundreds of families and clients over my time as a hospice social worker. And there are so many of these moments that I still so deeply remember. And this was one of them, where I worked with a woman whose dad had advanced Alzheimer's. He had been hospitalized He was having numerous episodes of aspiration pneumonia. And for those on the call who are not familiar with that term, it basically is a form of pneumonia that comes from someone who is having choking difficulties on food, and it gets aspirated into the lungs. The healthcare team wanted to know if her father would want to be removed from hospice and have a feeding tube put in place. And she came to me and she said, I don't know what my dad would want. This is a really difficult decision. And so we looked at his advance directive, and I asked her to read his living will because I had read it and I knew exactly what it said. And I really thought it was going to be beneficial to her. And she came back to me and I said, you know what your dad would want? And she said, absolutely. I knew that in that document, her dad never mentioned the term Alzheimer's, didn't talk about dementia, didn't talk about pneumonia of any kind, didn't talk about feeding tubes. But what he did talk about were his core philosophy of life, the core values, that what was important to him in successful living. And based on that alone, not even needing to have any medical guidance through his document, the family was able to very comfortably make a decision based on what they knew would have been important for him. That's the value of thinking about these documents, not always on medical terms, because we don't always know what's going to happen to us if we don't have a disposition for a disease or already been diagnosed. And so really thinking about it in different ways and documenting those conversations and that information is what can guide these documents. So here's some areas that you can think about. For instance, what do you value most about your life? What brings you joy? Is it living as long as possible, living an active life, and what does that mean for you? Enjoying the company of family and friends, remaining independent and in control. Are there certain mental or physical conditions that would make you think differently about the treatments that could prolong dying that you would want or no longer want? Is part of that around lack of awareness or self or surroundings, the inability to appreciate and continue important relationships, the inability to think well enough to make everyday decisions? Is it around severe pain or discomfort? And again, these documents are documents of choice and not limitation, because I have seen individuals have the opposite sides of that kind of line around the management of pain versus having pain that is balanced with the idea of awareness of self and surroundings. So some people want to be aware as much as that awareness can occur under severe pain versus taking medication. Other people absolutely want as much medication as they can so that they recognize that they are not going to be aware of the situation, but they are not going to feel that pain. Those are personal decisions. These are decisions that are often based on our life experiences, based on culture, based on faith, different aspects that really you only know as you explore these types of questions. How might personal relationships and responsibilities affect your medical decision making? Is it the idea that you want to be able to make your own decisions? The desire to avoid burdening family with difficult decisions, wanting to leave family with good memories, avoiding using up family savings. I know some family members who wanted to be outside of the home at their death. They wanted to be in some kind of hospice setting or assisted living. They did not want to die within their home. They felt, especially sometimes with young children, they felt that it was too difficult if that death occurred in the home. And others, that's all they wanted, was to not be in any kind of industrial setting or healthcare setting, institutional setting, I should say, and wanted to be in their homes. How you feel about death and dying, again, is often based on your own experiences and those that you've witnessed. And is your fear of death, is it that it will be too prolonged or too much pain? Do you want to die with respect and control? You do not want to suffer for a long time. So having answers to these kind of questions, and these are big questions, certainly, can really help in your discussion with who may be your agent to be that decision maker or the voice of your decisions, or what you put in the document themselves. Taking time today to think about how your life experiences, your family history, your core values, and your health status can help really build a roadmap for your advanced care plan. As I've shared in other sessions and talking about the documents themselves, these can be a roadmap, but oftentimes we don't have all the knowledge about what could happen, what symptoms we could experience. And so having more generalized conversations about values and philosophy and what's successful living is often helpful for an agent who may not have the direct knowledge of do you want a feeding tube, but certainly has an understanding of what is important to you in your life and as you are at end of life. As we're talking about this, again, I want to remind you to feel free to put any comments or questions in the chat that we can talk about at the end. So after having some of these discussions with yourself, maybe with close friends and family, even those that may not be the chosen decision maker, you want to then just review these answers and talk with loved ones, talk with those individuals who, again, may not be your decision maker. They may not be your noted or named agent, but it is still important to have these conversations with them. Just because, for instance, my spouse is my first named agent, I have had these conversations with my adult children, who, one of them is the secondary agent, the alternate agent, but the other children need to be aware of what is important to me and what I value, so that, again, they can feel comfortable with decisions that are being made, even if they're not the one voicing it. You want to document these wishes and goals for healthcare on an advance directive, a living will, a healthcare power of attorney. There's different forms, and many of these forms, for instance, the 5 wishes documents, really have a lot of life value questions that are asked of you that you can complete, and that document then stands as your living will. You then can complete, again, the documents, have them completed in the way that in your state that makes them valid, whether that is by signature of a witness or notary. And if you are in Arizona, to then register them with the Arizona Healthcare Directives Registry. There is no cost for registration, but it gives you confidence that those documents are going to be where you need them, when you need them, for both yourself as well as for named agents and healthcare providers. As I've shared in previous discussions, and I know there are a few of you on this call that have been at the other sessions, advanced care planning happens over a lifetime. These documents can be initiated at the age of 18 or when you are a legal individual, if you're emancipated earlier than that. But they should never be the only document. It should never be a document you're only going to complete once, because life changes. First of all, we can see that medical situations change, interventions change. I have seen now many more documents that incorporate visitation discussion in the document as an addendum to a living will. We never really thought about that until COVID a few years ago got us thinking about visitation schedule and having people come in. There were documents specific to COVID treatment that we've seen coming in since that. So what's happening in our kind of lifetime changes, treatment options change, but also our personal situations change. Who we're surrounded by, who is the most important decision maker in our life, and what's happening in our own healthcare often gets us to think and view life a little different and view medical interventions differently. So the 5 Ds to remember is, at least every decade, you should look at your document, see if it continues to reflect your wishes. upon a divorce. And that doesn't necessarily mean only a divorce, but there's a lot of changes in family structure that require us to look back at who's the chosen agent and are they still the best person to honor and reflect our wishes if we cannot communicate ourselves. Changes in diagnosis, a new disease, often can guide the kinds of treatments you want. There is, for example, for people who have dementia and Alzheimer's, many people who may have concerns about that or have some of that in a genetic history have put together addendums specific to if they have dementia or Alzheimer's. So again, knowing what your kind of possible path of disease could be may get you to complete different parts of an advance directive or think differently about some of the treatment options. Death, the death of someone close to us or family member not only can change that we need to appoint someone new to be our agent, but often informs us of things that we would want or not want within our own death, both around death and around funeral. And you can identify if your agent could make funeral decisions, and you also can identify around organ donation within a advance directive document. And then certainly decline, both from physical illness or age, decline in physical health, mental health. It may make some changes about what it is you want or don't want for your care. On our website at azhdr.org, we do have lots of different resources. There are videos that you can watch. They can be shared with loved ones or friends or colleagues. There's lots of different activities and games that you can do to really help think through some of these questions. There's lots of games out there to really get you to think about, well, what if, or if this versus this kind of games. And there's ones that those cards are really focused on advanced illness, end of life, death and dying. So it is, those are cards that are better done with friends and family in good music in the background, but it can be a really interesting conversation to have with others. Again, more information, not only about advanced care planning, but access to different types of advance directive documents, as well as detailed steps on how to register your documents if you are in Arizona or spend any time in Arizona, how to register them at no cost at the AzHDR. We are always available for questions. You can contact us through our website, but there's information here for email as well. And with that, I'm going to turn back to see if there are some questions or comments that have been left, or if people want to open up now to those.
There's nothing in the chat now, but if someone would like to be taken off mute and ask their question out loud, I'd be happy to do that for you instead of typing it out. But again, the chat is open for questions if you would like to type those out. But feel free to just raise your hand and I can take you off mute if you'd rather speak your question.
We do have 2 more sessions on tomorrow. We have another session on choosing your person, and that's going to talk a little bit about some thoughts about who would be a good agent to have. And then on Friday, we're going to talk about registering your documents and what that means in Arizona to be able to register your documents at the AzHDR. So if you are available for either of those, you can go to our website if you haven't already registered and register for free at azhdr.org for that event, as well as other events are highlighted that are happening across the state with some of our partners as well. So it is my hope that whether you have come for one session or participating in all of these this week, that it begins to either get you to look back at documents you may have already completed, either register them for the first time with the AzHDR, or look at them to ensure that they continue to reflect your wishes around healthcare preferences. And maybe if you haven't had a document, again, thinking about how you can talk with family and friends about doing this not alone, but together with others, and be able to take this valuable information and share it. So thank you for that comment.
I'm not seeing any questions. Thank you, Tracy, for the compliments. She just said thanks again for providing the valuable education. And there's also just a reminder, if you have any questions or you don't want to ask them now and want to ask them in private, you can reach out to Carla or anyone on the AzHDR team, and they'd be happy to follow up with you. And just as a reminder that the presentation will be emailed to you, the recording of the presentation will be emailed to you and will also live on the Contexture YouTube channel. So you'll be able to reference it in your email or on that channel in the near future. And it looks like there's no questions that have come through. So I would say that this concludes today's webinar, and we really appreciate some familiar faces in here and the new faces that are here. Appreciate your attendance and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.